translate and solve percent proportions. So we're going to take words, sentences. First, we're going to translate it into a math problem, a proportion, and then we're going to solve it. So when we're thinking about percent, remember that percent means per 100. So anytime you see a number with a percent sign, we're going to change that number to be over 100. So thinking about a proportion, okay, so let's put the proportion inside this box. So we're going to see a percent, and that number of a percent we're going to put over 100. That'll be one of our ratios for our proportion. The other one, with the sentence, I like to say is over of, and the more you say this out loud, the more you remember. It's also part to whole. Okay, that's kind of another way to think about it. The part always goes on the top, the whole goes on the bottom. That's how the percent over 100 works. 100% is the whole thing, and whatever percent, 18%, 30%, that is part of the whole. So let's look at this. We are going to express the following as a proportion and then solve. What number is 35% of 150? Now remember that we're going to create a proportion. So I always start by locating the percent because that's the easy one. 35% means 35 over 100. Now the other side, right? Remember we want is over of. Well, is what number of 150? The reason of goes on the bottom is because 35% of 150, this is the whole amount. So 150 is with the word of, it's the whole, goes on the bottom. What number is, we don't know, so the X goes on the top. And now we have ourselves a proportion. So then we can use our proportional rules to go ahead and solve. So we cross multiply. 100x equals 35 times 150, which is 5,250. To get x by itself, we divide by the coefficient, which in this case is 100. 100 divided by 100 is just 1, so I have 1x equals 52.5. Now, one thing that I always like to check is just kind of a common sense thing. When I compare 100 to 150, my number gets bigger, right? Not a lot bigger, but it gets bigger. So that means when I go to 35 to x, my number should get bigger. Not a lot bigger, but bigger. And 35 to 52.5 does indeed get bigger, right? It's just those kind of things to make sure your number's going in the right direction. A little common sense check. Let's do another. What percent of 60 is 45? Okay, so again, let's think about our proportion. Let's start with the percent. Now, in this case, it says what percent, meaning I don't know the number, but I know that the number or the percent is always over 100. So on the other side, I'm thinking is over of or part to whole. So of 60, this is the whole. What percent of the whole is 45? So I'm going to have 60 in the denominator, 45 in the numerator. And then I'm ready to cross multiply. So 100 times 45 is 4,500. 60 times x is 60x. To get x by itself, we divide both sides by 60 because that is the coefficient. And I end up with x equals 75. Now, one thing to remember, that this question asks for the percent, which means this is not 75, the number, this is 75, the percent. So you're just going to want to put 75%. Always go back and read the question. And the last one, 40% of what number is 70? Okay, so again, let's think through. We've got our proportion. I always start with the percent. So I have 40 over 100. So 40% of what number? So of the total is 70. Remember, is over of. The more you say it, the more you'll remember. So 70 is on top, x in the denominator. And then we're ready to cross multiply. 100 times 70 is 7,000. 40 times x is 40x. Divide both sides by the coefficient, which is 40, And we end up with x equals 175. Go back to our question. It asks for a number, so that indeed is our answer. And again, think about 40 to 70 gets bigger, 100 to 175 gets bigger.